Good morning, it's 10:05. I would like to call the meeting to order and ask that the roll be taken.
Jean Embler.
Present.
Christina Ponte. Judith Ann McLaughlin. Present. Paul Tilka.
Present.
Christina Lockhart-Wells.
Okay, so let's go ahead and begin. And we received the minutes, the draft early. I would like to thank the city staff for doing that. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
I'd make a motion to approve the minutes.
I can second. Go ahead.
Second.
Okay,
Judith Ann McLaughlin.
Approve.
Christina Lockhart-Wells. You approve?
Approve.
Paul Tilka.
Approve.
And Jean Embler.
approved.
Motion carried, 4-0.
A couple of questions. Do we expect our city manager to be with us today? Oh, okay. All righty. And I have a couple of questions outside of the topics for discussion. What's the appropriate procedural point to bring those up? Can I? Anytime? All righty.
You're the chair, you're in charge.
Wow. Trying to remember my Robert's Rules of Order back from 8th grade. Well, first of all, we referenced requesting certain documents, and I don't believe I got the documents. I talked to Paul. He doesn't remember. Christine, did you get anything? No.
They were sent. I'm not sure what happened, but we'll figure it out.
Okay, so I guess, to me, we've got two issues. We do want to see those documents. And second, I'd like to see a better methodology for checks and balances on, you know, can the city send emails with the return receipt, or do you want us to respond? Or I don't want an answer right now, but this seems to be a repetitive challenge for us, and I'd like to come up with a way that it's just a little more efficient.
Well, I mean, typically what happens is everything gets sent to the city clerk's office, and the city clerk disperses everything.
Okay,
So that's the procedure, I guess.
yeah. And that would be helpful to always get correspondence from one email, because I was searching your name and Clara, you know, everybody's name, so thank you. And I'll let you do a deep dive into that to find out what was the barrier of getting it, you know, out to us. And I thank you, Sean, for putting that together. A second question, and this is to my colleagues, and the intent is not to put anyone on the spot or to get defensive, but we had discussed reviewing the next 3 articles, and we suggested that people submit their comments in writing by May 15th. And again, this is not to make people feel defensive, but I saw that Christine and I submitted some thoughts, but other people didn't, and I wanted to understand if there were any barriers or personal preference that you don't want to work that way. And again, I'm open for suggestions on how to make our meetings the most productive.
I'll make a comment on that. Was asked by city staff if I had any changes or ideas, and I typically would prefer to just go with the flow as we go through material. Everything there has already been, we're reworking things. So I'd rather work through it that way than, if I came up with, I do have certain ideas as we go along with certain things, but this boilerplate stuff, in fact, I would like to see sort of what is boilerplate in as far as other communities and how they put theirs together. But I know that's typically a whole lot more work than revising our work minimally. But, so that's my case.
Okay? So I'm hearing that your preference is not to submit comments ahead of time, but rather to work through them
No,
at
no,
the
it's fine.
meeting.
I just didn't have any pertaining to this work.
Perfect, thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, okay. Anybody else want to comment?
I did hear from Christina Ponte, and she did not have, due to work, have enough time to go over, and I think she was traveling out of town for a few days too, so she didn't have enough time to submit her suggestions.
Okay. Then I'd like to suggest that at the end of the meeting, let's decide what we want to do for the next section. I don't want to put any undue work on the city if the rest of my colleagues don't think it's beneficial to submit comments ahead of time, but let's see how this goes, and we'll get the best way going forward. My next question, when I did submit my email to you, at the bottom of it is this note that says, Jean, disclaimer, under Florida law, blah, blah, email addresses are public records. If you do not want your email addresses released, blah, blah, do not send electronic mail to the city of Madeira Beach. I need some help understanding that.
Well, I think a lot of local governments have some variation of a disclaimer just to let the average citizen know that if you do interact with us via email, it is a public record. So in theory, don't yell at us if someone does a public records request and say, give me all emails between the city and whoever based on, related to this topic. And so then your email exchange gets swept up in that request because you were writing to the city about that topic. And then that person now has your email and writes you and says, what a terrible person you are, why did you tell the city that, or whatever, the thing is. Because the city has no real legal way to protect your email. There's an exception, there's a specific statute that deals with if the government collects email addresses related to emergency notifications, like hurricanes coming, so everybody gets a text message or an email or whatever, that data collected in that database doesn't have to be disclosed, because the legislature wants to encourage people to participate in those programs. But just in a general business sense, if you write to a commissioner or you write to city staff, it's just to say, be forewarned, someone requests a record and your email is in that record, it's going to get swept away. It doesn't mean that we're actively collecting all of y'all's emails and compiling them into some list. It's just, if the record's going to show your email address, if it gets requested, then it's going to be released.
Great, thank you for that. So then we've got no need to be concerned or to change the way we're doing business here as a committee, right?
That disclaimer is law. If it gets requested, they'll get it. But if it's something that needs to be redacted, it will be.
Okay. Thank you. And I've got two other things. First of all, we got an email about ethics training in July. Is that mandatory for those of us on the commission?
On any committee or board, it is, the law states that you have to be educated in it. You have to learn how to not to talk together outside meetings. It covers the open meetings law and the public records law, which will cover about the emails. And then there's ethics, about conflict of interest or anything that you vote on or whatever, when you should not vote, when you do. But it's very important laws that you have to be up to date on, and it's our responsibility to offer you those courses. And that takes a liability off of us.
Okay.
Actually, can I ask a follow-up question on that? Because I did my ethics training in December. So is the law that it's like every year you
It's
do
every
it?
year.
So is it like every calendar year, or would I be needing to do it again after December?
It's just before December 31st of each year. You can take advantage of the free ones, and there's also some that you can pay for. If you wait to the last minute, of course, there are courses you can get online and, and then you just let me know and show me the certificate that you had taken it.
Okay. Yes. Okay, thank you. And the last thing I have, Robin, I'm glad to see you with us. This is a follow-up to something that was discussed in our last meeting, and it is reflected in the minutes. It has to do with the fact that during our discussions last time, we found that the city has chosen to drug test everybody, even though the state of Florida has a section regarding who should be tested and who should not be. My understanding was that the city decided to go against the Florida statute because we're getting a discount on insurance. This is on page 3 of 3 in the minutes, and I would appreciate your thoughts and comments on that.
Always been a proponent of drug testing every employee. Most cities do that. Not sure why cities wouldn't, but that's in 28 years I've been in local government of 4 cities and 3 states. I've never worked anywhere where employees were not subject to an alcohol drug test as a condition of being employed. If Florida statute says we can't do that or it's illegal, then I guess we would have to follow Florida statutes. But I think it's a very good idea. I think it's a terrible idea not to do it, but not my decision if Florida statute says cities, you can no longer do that.
Okay, so I guess,
Manager.
Attorney?
Manager, you weren't at the last meeting.
Correct.
When it was discussed, but the 11th Circuit Court of Appeal, which covers Florida, ruled in, it's a teacher union versus Governor Scott in 2014, I believe, that the required drug testing of public employment applicants that are not safety sensitive are unconstitutional violation under the Fourth Amendment. And so that was what was discussed. And so I think it was discussed that y'all got an insurance break because you did that. And so my recollection is that y'all were going to go back to and talk to your insurer and sort of make them aware, guys, you're putting us in a difficult situation with your discount because, the court says we can't do this. And yet, if we stop doing it, we're going to lose our discount. So can you work this out, kind
Yeah,
of
we'll
thing.
see what needs to happen and we'll follow what needs to occur. But I find it odd. I mean, that's just, from my perspective, I think every employee should. I think it's a bad idea not to, but we'll
Right.
do what the law requires.
Okay.
Or make a request to change the law.
Okay, and then can we expect, I don't know, I mean, technically,
Well, I'm sorry to interrupt, if we're prohibited from doing it, then we will stop doing it.
okay. And then, so you'll give us an update by the next meeting, is that fair?
Well, I
or-
think if the Florida statutes or the court case says we can't, then we will stop doing that.
It's not founded on Florida law. It's founded.
court case, excuse me.
Founded on the Fourth Amendment of the United States Constitution. That's what the case was about.
Oh, thank you, I misspoke.
We will
then.
research and provide an update at the next meeting.
And for the record, I think it was a terrible decision. I mean, I was surprised when the 11th Circuit came out with that, because not just philosophically about it's good to test employees or applicants, but, I've always sort of looked at constitutional rights that you have the ability to waive them, so we know that the courts have told us that people who have the right to remain silent can sit there in front of a police officer and talk, even though their lawyer would tell them to shut up, and whatever they say can be used against them, right? They waive that right to remain silent. And so back at the time when that case came out, I'm like, well, wait a minute. If I choose as a citizen to apply for public employment, and I'm told by that employer, you must take a drug test in order to be a viable applicant. If I choose to move forward with the application, I waive my right under the search and seizure, under the Fourth Amendment. But the 11th Circuit didn't see it that way, and they are who controls us, and so, you know, I mean, it's up to the manager to make a business decision. And you know, as we said last time, unless an applicant sues us and so forth, you know, it's a business decision to say, we're going to keep on keeping on so we can get the discount. You know, and the manager and I can talk about that offline, but that's the nature of that. I did want to touch base on your ethics thing. I'm not sure if there's a resolution of the commission or whatever that makes the training for the advisory boards mandatory or not, but Florida Statute 112.3142, sub 2, talks about only elected municipal officials having the 4-hour mandatory course. So if the city is just making this available to you, you know, certainly you can participate in that. Y'all will recall that I gave you your own records ethics sunshine already, so I think y'all are pretty, you know, down with what the law says. But I just wanted to make sure that you understood that unless the clerk is aware of a resolution or ordinance of the commission that mandates that the city's boards and commissions attend, would be voluntary on your part.
The correspondence that I had sent out from Florida League of Cities, it does say the mandatory, but to you all, I want to make sure, because it's something you can't just learn in one session. We make it available to you every year because there has been times where members have made mistakes, you know, even when they were given that 10-minute briefing or whatever. So, like I said, you know, I offer it to you, and then that way the liability comes off of me because I am trying to get you at the class, or you can take it on your own, or, you know, every year, or take it by December the 31st, or whenever you want to, but I'm making it available to you. And as far as the mandatory one, like he said, you know, for public officials and all, they have to have it done by December 31st. But I do want to put it out there. It is easy to send an email and copy everybody, and if you get a response, if somebody responds to that and replies to everybody, it created a sunshine law violation. So there's a lot to it than just a 10-minute briefing or whatever, and it's easier. The more you learn about it, the better. So I want to make sure that the class is offered to you. You can take advantage of it, or you can take it on your own or not worry about it.
Thank you. And just to close out the drug testing thing, my concern is I'm not a proponent of hiring people who have not been drug tested. Where I'm coming from is that I saw in the policies and procedures manual, it said that some people will be drug tested. And so my question was, well, how do we decide which? And then it came out that everybody was. So I just want to be clear that I'm just trying to get our policy to reflect our practices.
Correct. The city's written policy was a little vague. The actual city's practice was that every person offered a letter of employment was conditional upon passing a drug alcohol test. It's not every applicant, it's everyone who was offered a position, which is, again, the standard many governments throughout the U.S., but we will research and get back to you.
Appreciate that, thank you.
I did have a conversation with the insurance company, and they said, basically, you can do what you want, but you'll lose your discounts. And also, you'll lose your, I'm not sure what the right word is, drug-free workplace certification we would lose.
Boy, they really are putting us in a box, right? Rock and hard.
Well, and we're not the only ones that would be subject to this, so I find it hard to believe that the court case is applicable. But, I mean, we will research and get back, because in local government in 28 years, this is lunacy if that's what they don't allow you to drug test employees, but it could be. We'll research and
Thank you.
advise.
St. Pete Beach does.
Yeah, I think most cities do.
everybody.
Other questions before we dive into the policies?
Yeah, I have one. You had mentioned drug and alcohol testing. And your last comment, is alcohol tested as well?
Sure, yes,
Oh,
it's all as one.
okay.
All right. I'm sorry, a question?
Was I supposed to pick that up when I walked in?
Do we have an extra packet? Here, you can have this one, because I've got it. Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Let me ask the city how you'd like to proceed. Christine did send some feedback, some comments about the articles that we reviewed last time. Should we quickly visit those and then go into the upcoming articles 4, 5, and 6? And who would like to lead this discussion? Sounds good.
Okay, so let's look at jeans first. Does everybody have that?
I was going to suggest we do Christina's first, because hers, like, just to go through starting in Article 1,
Okay.
because
that's fine.
Jean's start in Article 4.
It's at the very back of your pack. If I can just point people to page 58 of 59 in their packet. This is where Christina's comments are, and I think it makes sense to go with her questions, suggestions first.
Okay, you ready? So regarding the size of the city, we do have over 50 employees. We have 75, which is still quite small. And then Article 2C, regardless of probation, all employees are entitled to benefits and receive them the first of the month, 30 days after being hired. So keep going.
Article 2C. So do we have an answer to Christina's question?
It's irrelevant when it comes to benefits.
Christina, since this was your question, I'm going to ask you to bring up why you think we need to be having a chat about this particular area.
Well, there was something that, I mean, if I was interested in wondering whether or not I was going to get benefits, I would be wondering, well, do I have to wait the 90 days? I mean, if, it should be something that's addressed
Yeah, it's
in the
addressed.
benefits booklet.
Yeah, it is. You get your benefits 30 days, the first of the month after 30 days of hire. So if you started on June 15th, you would get it July 1st.
Are you okay with that?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Next one.
Article 3, Section 301, the policy is too vague. I think Section 1210 addresses that.
So I recall my notes show that we also had quite a discussion about this. And there was a suggestion that we use the attorney's language instead of this. And that the attorney also suggested that we add a formal complaint process. So am I hearing that the employment procedures, while it's mentioned briefly in 301, that when we get to Article 12, it will better explain it? Because I think all of us are a little, based on our last discussions, not quite comfortable with this.
Hang on, I'm trying to, oh, I said 1210, it's actually 1201. Sorry, a little dyslexic there. In your
So
packet,
now-
it's page 41.
Okay, so again, maybe we should get rid of this section altogether and incorporate it either in 1201 or incorporate, just give it its own article. And why is it addressed in two different sections?
Well, I think the one is referencing hiring, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, as per the minutes, that's one of the suggestions we made last time, was to have it be in the same place for clarity's.
All right, so what I'm hearing is that at our previous meeting and our current meeting, we're recommending that Section 301 be revisited by the city. The options are to use the attorney's language if we're talking about, pre-employment, or we consider addressing discrimination as its own separate entity.
Well, I think that is in 1201. I mean, if you look at that one, that's page 36 and 37. And it also has a complaint procedure in it.
But it's still listed, 1201 would be under miscellaneous, and I think we were suggesting that it would be its own article.
I can make it an article, that's not a problem.
So are we in agreement then that we agree that discrimination is very important to the city, and therefore we'd like to recommend that it become its own separate article? And however you structure it, whether, you mentioned pre-employment and also discrimination in the workplace, but I agree with Christina's thoughts that it's the right thing to do, and we also have to protect ourselves from litigation, so I would recommend that we have strong language regarding that and that it be in one article.
I think they're talking about it for sort of two separate reasons. Like, one is in the hiring process, which I think we need to state it, and the other is about, if something happens on the job. You follow me?
Can we hear from the attorney on this with a recommendation?
Okay, maybe then change the section 301 from policy to discrimination then? Because it just says policy. And the only thing it addresses is discrimination. Whereas section 302 says vacancies, 303, application for employment. Section 301 just says policy.
You're right.
Use as a heading of discrimination.
Yep. We can do that.
And again, as Judith Ann said in our notes, we talked about the city going back and looking at that language, perhaps using the attorney's language, but also adding a formal complaint process at some point. Is that work in place to review that section and consider a formal complaint process?
We have a complaint process. And that's again in section 1201.
What page is that on, please?
That would be in your packet 42 of 59 at the bottom.
Wait. Oh, okay, I see, thank you. Okay, so we have that, and then there was the suggestion that the city meet with the attorney to perhaps use the attorney's language. Is that still a recommendation from the commission? Are we okay with just changing the header? I think it was noted that the attorney's version had a lot more depth to it.
As far as the anti-discrimination in hiring,
Yes.
did we get a response from the attorney on your recommendation?
Well, I mean, we can't keep getting back into this every meeting. I've made my recommendation. The administration's heard my recommendation. The administration is presenting to you what it's presenting to you. So, I would just be repeating what I've said over and over. I mean, I believe my language is better language, but, we have to move forward with this, or we're going to keep circling around, so.
Yeah, I think we share the same frustration. So if the city is okay with this, and if we of the commission say, we're not comfortable, we prefer the attorney's version, who has jurisdiction and the ultimate say? I don't want to keep circling back either.
Ultimately,
if-
under the charter and the code, it's the manager's authority and duty to bring forward recommended personnel policies to the commission. He's doing that through his HR director. You all are built into that process to provide review, comment, request change, whatever. Whatever you recommend will be bundled up into meeting notes, as they have been being. And then if the administration brings forward something that you all don't recommend or recommend something differently on this or any other issue, it's up to the commissioners to read the minutes of the meeting, see that there was an alternative recommendation from the commission, and then, the manager presents to the commission, here's why we are going in this direction, and it's up to the commission to make the decision. So at the end of the day, I think you've made, on this particular issue, you've made your position clear. The administration's made its position clear, so probably just your minutes would reflect that your preference would have been to use the alternative language and then move forward and start talking about some of the other sections, so.
Thank you for clarifying the process, and I like the idea that if we suggest something, that the city comes back to us and just says, we've heard you, however, we are recommending we stay on path B instead of you are considered. But I would at least like that feedback that you've heard us, but,
Oh, no,
No.
I've heard you, yeah,
Yeah,
loud and clear.
okay.
Yeah,
okay,
but this is our recommendation.
all righty. To leave it and then to only change policy to discrimination. That's the change that's going to be made.
Yep,
Okay, all right,
and make Article 1201 a header,
correct. Great.
or an article, rather. So then, I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
Since you're going to be following up on the research on the drug issue, and you were going to look into that, the case is American Federation of State, County, and Municipal Employees, Council 79 versus Scott. And the citation is 717 F. 3rd, 851, 11th Circuit, 2013, so I was 1 year off.
Thank you.
Okay. Can we go ahead and move on to Christina's questions about Section 302?
Yeah, so typically what we do, we post internally and externally. We'll give preference to internal candidates. But if an internal candidate doesn't work out, right, and then we have to repost, it puts us behind. So we're collecting applications in case an internal does not work out. So it would just delay things if we did one then the other.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is that you do open it for everybody, but you give
Correct.
preferential treatment to internal
Yeah,
candidates first?
qualified internal candidates, yes.
Okay, okay.
Okay. Your next thoughts on 305 to 307, Christina? Or,
307.
Where are we? Oh, I have 303 as next.
301, 302,
Oh, 303, yeah, sorry. I did them out of order, didn't I?
oh, there it is, yeah, sorry.
So basically, the city manager runs interviews for his or her direct reports, but delegates other positions to the respective director. And the city manager signs off on all offer letters.
I'm sorry, say again?
Okay, so the city manager takes care of the interviews for his direct reports. So people that report to him, he interviews. But the city manager delegates other positions to the respective director. So,
But he has the overall say as to who's hired and?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if he is the one that is hiring, how does he know whether or not that candidate is not?
So we have a hiring process, and the hiring process actually, points us to the best suited candidate, and the director makes the recommendation. That's it.
If I don't have confidence, and this is any executive in any organization, if you do not have confidence in your department heads, bureau chiefs, deputies, et cetera, as to who they're hiring, there's a bigger problem. But I have full faith and confidence in the department heads that they are following the process, and they are recommending the most qualified person to be hired.
Okay. Christina, go ahead then. 304?
Examinations?
Yeah, the examinations. So I was just looking at I'm just trying to keep the city from having any kind of litigation. That's, I mean, I've worked for big companies, I've worked for little companies, and both of them were sued. So I don't want any problems, but I just,
Well, we have a pretty good track record.
well, yeah, that's good. That's good. I mean, but the point is the city's growing, and you have new people coming in, and you don't know what their intentions are either. And the more people you have coming in, the more employees the city's going to need. So the more CYA, the better off you're going to be.
I understand. That's kind of my job.
So the litigation, to limit the litigation, the better off you are by covering your butt, by having things that lay things out. The verbiage in the attorney's handbook does that. So, which is why I suggested it on some of the things. Also, I find that the handbook kind of, I don't want to say it dummies it down, but we have to expect our employees of the city to be able to read and understand the handbook.
Correct.
They're educated enough to do that. So why does it seem like this is so dummied down?
Well, just for that, so everybody can
Exactly.
understand it.
Yeah, so it can be very easily understood.
But so isn't this. I mean, we have to think that our Madeira Beach employees are educated enough to understand the handbook, right? We hire educated, employees.
That's not necessarily true. Some of our laborers and, graduate high school and that would be it.
If you graduated high school, you should be able to understand this.
Understand this one, sure.
The one from the attorney.
Christina, I hear where you're going, and this has been brought up several times. Several of us have shared your concern that we would have preferred that the baseline that we started working off of and pared down, many of us would have preferred that we started with the attorneys as the base and we brought it down where appropriate. Beyond our discussions, the city decided to go with their version and build it up. And I don't think it's productive to go every meeting and revisit that. Trust me, I share your concern and your opinion.
I'm just saying, we
Just-
have to expect more from city's employees. I just.
Yep.
That's why I chose the attorney's verbiage on that.
And I
304.
I shared your concern about examinations. The agreed upon change was that aspects of examinations will be approved by the HR director instead of the city manager. Other than that, there were no other suggestions or recommendations.
307, I just said maybe its own article.
Nepotism?
Yeah, we went through that already. Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Are we on to the next group of questions?
Could I ask a question about Article 1 before we go on to the Articles 4 to 6? Because I realized I hadn't mentioned it. This was on page 4 of the plan. The end of section 102, where it says, all references designate both sexes, wherever either gender is used, it should be construed to include both genders. I was just wondering if we could make a gender-neutral plan where we're just referencing employees and not talk about genders of the
I would
employees.
just remove this, then remove
Yeah.
that section.
Because I didn't notice there were
Fine.
other places that was like, it mattered whether we identified someone as a male or
Well, that's-
female.
You'll find language that says he
Right, so I just,
or meter maid.
yeah, exactly. So I just thought maybe, yeah. So I guess my suggestion is if we can just take that out and just refer only to employees.
And Christina, on your page, you've got something titled A and B, recommendations for assignment, recommendations for staffing level changes.
Too much paper.
I don't know how those got messed up. Apologies, I'm not really sure which section that belongs to.
Okay.
Well, if you're referring to those sections A and B, they are governed under the city's budget process, and so those changes cannot occur without a budget approval by the Board of Commissioners.
Let me suggest that if you recall the context of that, we can circle back later.
Sure, that's fine.
But Sean, did you want to go ahead then and continue, let's continue with Articles 4? And does it make sense that as a group, we all go to the specific article, allow everybody to speak up just like we did last time, and my article, I mean, I gave them ahead of time, and I'll just bring them up as we get to each page, rather than go through everything that I did. I'd rather go sequentially through the articles and let everybody address them.
Can you answer the last question, though, as
I'm
to
sorry.
whether or not the city is an, is an at-will?
Yes.
Yeah, we're at will.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. You are an at-will.
Yes.
Isn't the whole state of Florida at will?
Yes.
Well, I mean,
Unless you have a union contract.
Which we have one union for the.
Commissioners, at-will employment is that an employee may be fired or quit for a good reason, a bad reason, or no reason at all, except, of course, that whether it's public or private employment, you can't fire an employee for a illegal reason, such as discrimination or anything like that. That's at-will employment. In public employment world, most of your employees are not at will. They are civil service protected. That is why they have appeal rights and so forth. They have a due process system. Every city and county does it differently. Some have a civil service board, some have an arbitrator or whatnot. And that's based upon a couple of United States Supreme Court cases which indicate that public employment is a form of protected property right. And so to take that property right away, the government must afford some form of due process before the person is terminated. the courts also recognize that some levels of public employees may serve in an at-will capacity, such as our manager, usually your department heads are not civil service protected. I don't know where this city draws the line in terms of how far down in the management chain it goes that you don't have an appeal right, but usually that's set forth in the job description so that when that particular person gets hired into that class, they understand that, that the manager can remove them without any further course that they may have to take. So that's what at-will employment means in public sector world.
Thank you. I was just wondering where the words per charter come in. Like if you were at will or you were a per charter city. Nobody. I actually think I did get some of the emails that were attached and watched the process of an employee, a grievance.
Yeah, that's outlined in the handbook.
No, it was the process of the grievance that I was watching. And it was whether or not it was an at-will or per charter termination.
I'm not sure I understand the question, I'm sorry.
That's the reason why I asked the question, was there was a question whether or not it was Madeira Beach was an at-will or per charter.
Okay.
Maybe you're referring to something Claire sent out. They were two cases.
Yes.
And you reviewed the one case? Yes.
Yes.
So I sat on both of those hearings, and
I
left a
did see
lot
your
of-
name.
Huh?
I
It
did
left-
see your name, yeah.
it left a lot of questions.
Yeah.
And this at-will business, I mean, I'd like to ask the attorney right here now, are our employees protected by the Civil Service Commission?
Well, under,
He just
who
said
asked the
no.
question?
No?
He
My
just said
question-
no, it was an at-will state.
Huh?
He just said no. He just said no.
Oh, okay. So they're not protected. So as a Civil Service Commission, I believe some Civil Service Commissions function to protecting the employees.
And I believe they used to, and that's why the case was in front of the Civil
Well-
Service Commission. But they
Yeah,
no
well, it all sort
longer?
of came to a head because in the end, the manager made the final ultimate decision. And I think it should be reviewed, that whole process of how that came to be. And there should be some provision for the Civil Service Commission to have some say and not even have the manager give a reply.
A say in,
How's that?
you said the commission should have a say in
The
all
outcome?
discipline matters, terminations,
No,
everything,
no,
some of it? I'm just,
No.
to clarify.
I think when, especially when the employee presents a case before the commission and the manager does not even reply or respond to the commission and our request to appear and give his evidence, he just overrode everything. I have a copy of his letter if you'd like to see it.
Something that happened in the past is
Yeah.
what? Oh,
yeah,
okay.
This,
Okay. Yeah, I'm not-
two managers prior. But how all that came to pass, and furthermore, the manager, I think it would be a good exercise even for a manager to review this case, because most of it was about him.
So
And his actions I don't know who he consulted. Well, he did consult the city's employment attorney, but as far as I know, but it was just, we had no recourse whatsoever, even with an employee that was presenting her case. It was just not even respected.
Paul, I'd like to respectfully disagree with you. This happened 2 city managers ago, and I don't know what good could come of revisiting the past. That said, I think it's important that going forward,
Yeah.
we have a clear process that existing employees can file, move upward their complaint, and then, to your point, what role do we have? I'm assuming that the escalation process, we are going to be the last stop, and similar to what we talked about earlier, does what we say override the city's decision?
No. Under the charter, it's very clear that the Civil Service Commission's outcome is advisory to the manager. That's how the charter is set up.
Yes.
But you need to understand, so we can be legally clear, there's a difference between who gets to make the final decision and whether you're at will. And so employees who may avail themselves of the opportunity to come to you, and I tried but failed to get the word grievance taken out, because grievance is, in union world, it is the air conditioning is too cold, I'm being made to work too long, all of those things. That is different from a appeal of an adverse employment action. Be that as it may, we are going to keep calling it grievance, but what in effect is a post-termination appeal, right? I've been told I'm going to be fired, I want to come to this body and I want to make my case. The reason why they have that right is because the city has an obligation to state just cause and say, what reason did you get fired? And that reason has to be based upon the city's rules and so forth, unless you fall into one of the exempt at-will people in higher management. But at the end of the day, it's still, that is a process that the due process requires that employees be given to make a case, to make a defense of themselves. The manager, however, doesn't get taken out of that process. He or she does in some other cities, I think St. Pete still has a civil service commission where it makes the final decision and it can overrule a terminating department head's decision. But the law doesn't require that. And so, for instance, as you all know, I spent many, many years in Manatee County, and their process was you get fired, your pre-termination meeting was with the director who was going to fire you. If you still got fired, you got a post-termination hearing, and that was in front of a hearing officer. And the hearing officer produced a recommended written order which went to the county administrator, who made the final decision. So, my recommendation and my policy was to have this city move toward a situation where each department head who best knows their employees does the hiring and firing, and then there's an appeal process. You all are involved in an appeal process. Then you say, this doesn't seem like it should happen, too severe or whatever, but that still would go to the manager at the end of the day, because the charter says the manager is the final say on terminating someone. So does that help clarify kind of where your role is? It's always going to be advisory, unless the charter gets
We
amended.
change the charter.
Yes, but I must say that you can learn things from past experience with this commission, and I think you're wrong, actually, because I do think that certain things need to be reviewed, and this could be a big help to us at designing a plan to help the city and deal with employee grievances, because it was, I don't know, to me, it was not handled properly in 2 instances. The only 2 that I sat on were just basically overruled totally by the manager. And he was definitely party to the first instance, I believe, so. But you can review it or not, that's all. I think it's a good lesson that what could and probably will pop up again, because it has in the past.
I guess
That's
I'm
all I
not-
had to say on that. Yeah.
I agree, we could look at it, but if I'm hearing the attorney correctly, the manager had the ultimate say-so, and we might disagree with that. I just don't want to open that back up again with the employee. And is that what you're intending, or are you intending that we
No,
review
well,
it just as a learning
And-
exercise?
Well, how do I really feel? I feel the employee was totally mishandled, and it would be more appropriate to review it, and I don't know, how do you back something up? She's no longer with the city. But,
I guess, Paul,
Oh.
what is your proposal
Well,
that,
no, just that maybe you would read the two documents that Claire sent to you, and if you have any questions about them, ask.
oh, okay, I'm totally fine with. I
That's
thought
all.
you said that you wanted to revisit this, bring it back up again.
Well, I think, no, my point is that, let's say we have another case come before us, and the employee's grievance, and we request the city manager to come and give his explanation as to what happened. And if he turns his back on us, refusing on several requests to give his say-so, there should be something that would empower us to, have him also testify. I mean, it was, the
Well,
thing was handled
And
simply.
so that's a situation, you wouldn't put that in your personnel policy, but for there, my recommendation for any of you, and you all have copies of the charter section, I think the clerk provided you when you joined, the charter section that applies to you, and the code section that applies to you. So the code section that applies to you, I don't believe it currently has any authority on your part for subpoena power. But
Oh.
so to be effective,
Right.
if you see in your experience, prior or current, that the code is not giving you what you think you need, then your role is to discuss this in a meeting of yourselves, and then send a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners, because they're the ones that adopt code amendments, and say, Dear Board of Commissioners, we believe that we do not have enough power to compel witnesses to come before us in these cases, and not necessarily drag, the past, well, the manager didn't come, or, more in general discussion of, we believe to be effective, we need this power. And then if the commission wishes to give that power to you, it's a very easy thing to instruct us to draft an ordinance, to add that subsection to the code, and give you subpoena power. Problem solved. The manager can never ignore you in the future. And I would imagine that the manager that stands before you today would never turn his nose up at you.
Yeah, well,
That is, I would be here if you asked me to be here, whatever day and time. In the 5 months I've been here, I'm pretty much everywhere and try to respond to everything that I possibly can. And certainly my priority is our employees, and to make sure that, number one, they're safe, number two, that they want to come to work, and that they feel a part of that they're contributing to this city. So everything that I do every day, the first thought that comes into my mind is the 75 people that are working here in Madeira Beach.
sure. And that's, as a good manager should be, I might say.
Sean, you pointed us to language about the appeal process as it relates to discrimination. Do we have a similar process to appeal, kind of like what we're talking about now?
Article 9.
Okay, so we'll be looking at that for next time. Great, thank you. Christina, was there anything else
I apologize, Madam Chair, I just wanted that last question
No,
answered.
it sparked really good discussion, so no need to apologize. Thank you. Okay, are we ready now to proceed with Article 4? I had two written comments. 401 on page 12, which I'm seeing is the little number on one of the documents, so anyhow, 401, it says, "The city may present changes," I'm sorry, "where are the plan elements stored and how often are they reviewed?" I'm looking at the classification plan, job title, job description, pay plan. How is that process managed?
They're all living documents, I guess you might say. The pay grades are probably looked at once a week. You know, so when we bring in a new employee, we want to make sure they're in the right spot. Does it make sense with this one? You know, all that sort of thing. We change the minimum and the maximum when we get any sort of COLA increase. So if we got 3%, we would move both of them up 3%, the minimum and maximum. Anytime we have a new position, we have to go through the whole thing. So, I mean, we just recently made about 4 changes that needed to be done.
Okay. Also, on that same page, it says, the city may present changes to the CSC. The word "may" always dismays me, because that means if you want to, you can, but you don't have to. Is this required in the charter, or it's just an option?
Clara, you want to?
I think it's been an option. But this goes back to what I said a few minutes ago, that this will go as part of the annual budget process.
Sorry, one of the duties of the civil service, you meet quarterly, and you're going over the city manager or somebody, you know, they let you know you check to see what the problems are with what's written or whatever, and things could be changed. And then that'll be another recommendation, it'll go through an ordinance, if the city manager agrees to it and everything, because anything can be revisited. And any of the shalls in your responsibility in the charter, the only way that can be changed is by a vote by the voters.
So what I don't like is the word "may," and I'm suggesting you
get
change
rid
it to "must," because if it's written as "may," you might choose to send to some, but then again, you might not. And so,
It gets changed through the board. I mean, changes come to the civil service. They work on it. The city manager, if he agrees to that way it's written and everything, then it's put in an ordinance format. And then that gets changed and put in the personnel policy.
How about will? The city will present changes to the CSC.
Yep. That works.
Yeah, you put that
I'm
in.
fine with it.
thank you. Any other questions, comments on section 401? Anything for 402?
Okay.
403, I had two thoughts, but I'm going to open it up to my colleagues first.
Would you like me to explain?
Sure.
Okay, so lump sum merit payout would be given to somebody that's reached the top of their scale. Typically, they're employees that have been here for a really long time. And so if the top of the scale is 50 and they get 3%, it wouldn't be added to their pay, they would be paid out in a lump sum.
You mean a one-time payment
A one-time payment, yeah.
each year?
Until the range catches up to them, if that makes any sense.
Correct.
So that you're paying someone when they leave the city? that what you're saying?
No, this
No,
is
no.
annual salary increase for someone
At the
who
top
is
of
at
the
the top of the pay scale, pay range. There's a minimum and a maximum. So if the maximum is $70,000 and the employee is making $70,000, they're to receive a 1% increase. Their salary is not increased to $70,700. They receive a one-time payout of $700. Their salary remains at $70,000.
And the following year,
If we did not adjust the pay range, the same thing happens the following year. If it's a 1% salary increase, that employee is at $70,000, the top of the pay scale, they receive 1%, if it's a 1% increase, they receive $700 as a one-time payout.
Could also be like a hybrid. So let's say they're making $70,000, now the new range is $71,000. They would get $1,000 added to their paycheck, added to their salary, and anything over that would be paid out in a lump sum.
We strive to avoid that, but
I guess this is totally new to me, if this
Yeah.
is common in municipal governments,
Yes.
but I would want to hear thoughts from others as to whether or not this is the right thing to do.
But you have to be careful because without that, salaries for long-term employees could get really out of hand. You know, if you think about somebody that's reached the top of their scale in, let's say, 20 years, you know, and they're going to be here 30 years, that's a lot of money.
I'm just used to, you're at the max,
Yeah.
thank you very much,
Oh.
no increase?
no increase.
I have
You are at the
never heard
max.
of that.
I'm not from a government.
Yeah, I mean,
I'm from
I'm
a
just
a
explaining.
business perspective,
Sure.
that once you've.
Oh, yeah, that's
and then
common
it
in
was an
private.
optional discussion, but certainly not mandatory. Again, that's my experience, but
Mm-hmm.
it's business related, so if this is common practice and acceptable, I've learned something.
In cities, it is quite common.
School districts, too.
So, you know, my 2 cents on the process is it, from the perspective of potential claims, I mean, at least as I read it, it seems a bit subjective, you know, that each individual department director decides based upon a standard that's not published anywhere, whether someone's going to get or not going to get. And so, you know, what can happen is that you get claims that, oh, you didn't give this to me because I'm a woman or whatever. I am, you know, of course, familiar with one-time lump sum payments, and the manager and the HR director are correct. You know, that part of the problem in public sector is you get these minimum, maximum ranges, and then someone who's been here forever hits the top of the range. And so if the commission gives a across-the-board 3% raise or whatever, that employee may miss out on that if they're already at the top of their range. They're capped out. And so a lot of governments solve that by one-time payments that don't add to the base rate. But you know, in my experience, how that has worked out is it's put into each budget resolution every year where that's going to occur, who gets it. And it sets forth, you know, you can't have been disciplined in the past year, and usually the key is there's an evaluation tied to it, and it will say, if you got a 4 to 5 out of 5, you'll get this percent. If you got a 3 to a 4, you'll get this lower percent, and if you get a 0 to a 1, you get no percent, you know, that, so that everybody's being treated equally in that boat. There's no statute that says you can't do it this way. My only counsel to the city and to you is that if you do it this way, it is more subjective, and there can come a time where someone says, this makes no sense at all, this is favoritism, or this is, you're not giving this to me because I'm a woman, because I'm a man, because I'm white, because I'm black, whatever the protected category is, And, then at that time, of course, we will have to defend ourselves by explaining why we did what we did. And maybe we do that well, and maybe we don't. But that's why I'm always in favor, if you're going to do this kind of thing, just spell out what process you're going to use and treat everybody equally.
So is it reasonable then to suggest that our attorney just write some language to beef up that one sentence
Just
to
to-
clarify?
I just want to make one point. Merit increases are based on a formal evaluation. So it's not just arbitrary, you get 2, you get 4. It's a formal evaluation.
Right, but, the point is, if I'm working in Department A and I get a 4, and my department head says, guess what? I think you're going to get a bonus. And I work in another department and I get a 4, and my department head says, I don't know that you get a bonus. How is the city going to respond to that?
That's why you just brought up the argument why cities don't typically have merit increases for that exact same argument, excuse me, that have led to lawsuits and discrimination concerns. So,
But even if it's a COLA,
correct.
My-
Everybody receives it, so there's no issue.
I think we just want to expand the language because employees will look at this and just kind of, what you said, it'll be part of the budget process to look at who would be and kind of expand out how we're going to do this to ensure that we're consistent. Or, thoughts?
I mean, the policy doesn't include the performance evaluation language, that their merit is based on performance, and then further on, it talks about the rating for the work performance. I guess that's 501, so I guess what I'm not sure of, and I don't know if it's in that document that we haven't seen as far as what the scale is or what the metrics are, but the plan does
The
reference.
metrics are in the evaluation.
Yeah, so it seems like it's covered.
Yeah, the issue really is, the biggest issue, negative issue is in the very first sentence of 403, where it says, based upon written recommendation from each department director. And so, that raises the issue of the different directors not treating people the same. And then you're going to get the employee saying, wait a minute, I'm looking at this person that works in the department right over here. I worked just as hard as they did last year, and yet my director doesn't give me a written recommendation, even though I got the same score. Why didn't I get it and the other person did? Just because my director didn't give me a recommendation.
So I see what you're saying. Should we change written recommendation to formal evaluation?
Well, I think it should try to convert it to something that's just agency-wide, that in any given budget year where we decide to do this, the award will be based upon blah. And don't take the department head's ability to give it or not give it out of it. I mean, I know, that department heads like to be able to do that, but they get their ability to give their opinion when they do the evaluation and when they give them the 3 or the 4. That is their assessment of their employee. You guys at the top level, across the board, need to decide then, okay, everybody that got a 4, whatever department you work in, you're going to get this much bonus. That's how I would sort of revise it to take out that subjectivity allegation.
So is the action step that the two of you will spend some time thinking about this and coming up with some improved
Well,
language?
I think,
or you think Sean-
director heard what the issue is. I think he understands this, so he's going to probably take a crack at redraft, and then the next meeting, you guys will get a fresh thing, and he can go over with you at that time what he's done to resolve it. And in the interim, if he wants to chat with me about his possible ideas, I'm here for him.
Okay, let's move on. Thank you. Section 404.
Four?
Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped one of my comments. On page 13, is it a typo that says, the amount of each merit increase will be decided upon, blah, 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 and in coordination between the Civil Service Commissioner? Commission, yeah, so I think that's a typo. And has this been done in the past? You know, how involved has the Civil Service Commission been in the budgeting and merit increase awards process? I can only speak for myself and say, I've never been invited to that party.
You're not invited to that. The party you're invited to is what you're doing now, policy development, right? It is for the manager and his budget team to come forward every year with, here's how much we recommend, commissioners, that you adopt this budget. Here's where we recommend you're going to spend this budget. And part of that is salaries and benefits. And so it is not for you all to administer the compensation program. That's for the manager and his directors to administer. So what your role is in protecting the employees and making sure that there's fair, equitable policies is at this level of, are we ensuring that the process that he follows, he and his team follow, is fair and equitable and legal? Once you set that policy, or once you recommend that policy, it's up to him and his team to apply that policy. So you're never going to be invited to looking at, in any given budget year, who gets merit increase, who doesn't, what the cutoff is. That's for the management team to handle.
Right. You have the authority to help write the methods that they follow. Is in the charter here.
I just think that language is confusing, and I read it that the amount of each increase will be decided in coordination between us, finance, human resources, and I agree, that's not our,
I don't even think it
that's
should,
not our role.
I don't even think it should be in there.
I agree.
Yeah, remove
Yeah,
it.
I think that should be stricken. I trust you folks to administer your salary plan and your budget.
Correct. Because what's in the charter, you put forth the policy. Y'all work on it. You come up with a policy. And at the end of it, whatever's concurred with by the city manager goes to the board. And it says that it includes methods of determining the merits and fitness of candidates and appointments and promotions. It's got a big list. So you can come up with like different things, and what's in that policy at the end that gets adopted by ordinance is what everybody follows. Is what they're explaining.
So you should probably just recommend that y'all be taken out of that particular paragraph.
Thank you. I accept responsibility for doing this work. I don't want to be part of usurping the city's control over their
Correct. You're just
budget.
gonna lay
So
out the
if you'll
policy.
please strike the whole, forget correcting the typo, and I want to suggest striking Civil Service Commissioner from there.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. I don't have the right party dress. All right, can we go on to 404?
I don't see a 404.
I don't have any comments for 404, but does
Okay.
anybody
Oh, okay.
else have any thoughts on work period and calculation of overtime? Okay. Section 405, I had a question about on-call status, and I know that for us, if we have people who are on call at the hospital, regardless of where they live, there's a stated requirement that they be within either X miles or X minutes of when on call. Is this something that should be clarified?
I'm not sure how we do that. I mean, then this is only in case of state of emergency. I'm not sure how you do that. I don't know where you draw the boundary. I mean, because don't forget, on this side of us, there's nobody. Right? So, I mean, we have employees that come from Palmetto. So, I don't know how you can restrict where they live.
You generally, I think it's impractical on a on-call by on-call basis to tell the person that they have to be 15 minutes away. I think how I've seen it handled before is that, and I know, at Manatee County, we owned our own EMS, and we wanted our EMS people nearby or whatever, and same thing with the utilities folks, if a water line breaks, you need to be able to have the staff jump out of bed and respond quickly. And so how the county handled that was that for those jobs, there was actually in the job description and the requirements for the job, you must live within the county, you must live within, 20 minutes of the public works facility, whatever the issue was. And so that way, to even be hired and to keep your employment, you had to sort of agree that my residents will be here. But for folks that are already on staff and we're really just talking about standing by for a hurricane or whatnot, the HR director's right, it's just not a practicable thing to do. And usually those things get worked out where if you happen to live in Odessa or something and you work for Madeira Beach and you can't possibly get here sooner than an hour and a half, if, your position's going to be, okay, well, I'm willing to go on call and take a pager, even though pager is kind of an antiquated, phrase in here. Just know I'm not going to be able to get there in an hour and a half, boss. And if the boss is okay with that, then fine, they're on call. If not, then the boss has to figure out somebody else to put on call.
Okay,
And if you're concerned about fire, they're staffed 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
right. Okay.
Yeah, and there's mutual aid agreements with other agencies, so even if we are short-staffed, the agency next door is going to, police and fire are always going to get the coverage they need.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else for 405? Let's go on to 406. I've got 2 comments in that area. On page 14, it says that salaried employees for attendance purposes are required to use the time clock for in and out punch. Now, throughout this document, I see us referencing salaried, classified, non-classified, exempt, not exempt.
So it boils down to this. Non-classified employees are exempt and usually salaried. Classified employees are usually non-exempt and paid hourly.
And at the very beginning, when we had a definition of terms, I don't know that it was, we've got classified employees and non-classified. We don't talk about exempt or non-exempt, and then we talk about salaried. Is it clear to our employees when we swing between all of these different terms? Is it clear whether the policy applies to them or not?
I've never had a question about it since I've been here.
When I write personnel policies, anytime you discuss compensation, you always should use the FLSA phrase, so it's either FLSA exempt or FLSA non-exempt. People use the word salary or not salary. That's not really, the cleanest, clearest way is, are you exempt or are you not exempt? Because if you're exempt, and by exempt I mean exempt from FLSA's overtime requirement and minimum wage requirement. Now, those folks may or may not be salaried. But the FLA doesn't care about that. It simply says, if you're going to want to not pay someone minimum wage, and you're going to want to not pay someone overtime, really overtime is the issue, then they need to fall in certain classifications, management or executive or educated attorney, those sorts of things that are FLSA exempt. So, it's, my recommendation is that staff would just go through the document, and any place where they're talking about compensation and distinctions in compensation, just convert it to FLSA exempt or FLSA not exempt, so that everybody knows exactly what's being talked about.
That is the simplest way.
Yeah.
And we would include definitions of exempt and non-exempt as were just mentioned.
Great, thank you so much. And the other one I have, page 14, all right, in the last paragraph, I think it's a typo. I don't think we need an apostrophe for hours. Indicate the number of actual hours.
I don't see it.
It's the last, 406 starts with pay period and payroll. First paragraph starts with unless otherwise specified. Next paragraph says all hourly employees shall, blue stuff, indicate the number of actual hours with an apostrophe. I'm sorry, Claire, can't hear you. Oh, right, so I'm just requesting, take it out.
Yes.
Fix- That's that. Who else has some thoughts on section 406?
Oh, okay.
Really?
Oh, right.
Girl?
Thank you. If I don't have my glasses on, I can't see up there. If I do have them on,
I
I can't
was
see
just
down
pointing
here,
out that-
so I appreciate.
No, the item is, the item that's on the meeting agenda online is a different item than what you're discussing. The page numbers don't align. You just mentioned section 406. This says page 12 or 17 of 59, so.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out how we do this, because I have a
I
document
mean,
that
as long as we have the correct section.
Yeah.
And language, that's all that matters.
Yeah, I've
Just
labeled
wanna
this one my
point
working
that out.
document.
And if anybody's watching this, it's going to be different.
Thank you. Yeah,
Document itself is in there is the same, but except for the pages.
Right.
okay.
Well, where's the section that was just brought up? It's 406
The next paragraph, yes.
here, right. However, it looks correct here.
correct on there.
That's why I'm saying, it looks like this one changes have already been
I
made,
couldn't find it. No.
so.
Okay.
Either
yeah.
way.
Well,
My packet is the same as that one. I guess I'm pretty much.
and say, this is what we talked about before, was somehow coming up with version control, because,
I would stick to what's in the agenda, so this is the document that's in the agenda that you should be reviewing, but
okay. And then,
I think
again,
the- I
can we
think-
label
Same.
it?
I think the issue is the page numbers change depending on how long the agenda is. So it gets sort of confusing.
Yeah, it's the same document, except that the agenda's got different page numbers.
I see.
I
Okay.
think
when
that-
you
that-
reviewed it, it had different page numbers as well.
Yeah, I think that the chair's point is just every time you create a new version, just go do a footer or something for each page and say version number 2, version number, or date, this is the version.
The
created.
version hasn't been changed, it's the same one, it's just if you have less documents on the agenda, the pages are different. Using the same document we've been looking
Right,
at.
okay. But they're somebody's using a different document.
Yeah, I'm using the document that we were asked to review before the meeting, the one that was in the binder.
In the agenda, okay.
Not on the agenda. So we were given a document to review, so I was reviewing that.
Isn't that the
And
one
my
that was
notes-
in, that's,
It's
One
similar, but
is-
it's not exactly the same, because we just saw a difference
Yeah.
right in this
Gotcha, okay.
section.
Okay.
The
right?
other
So
agenda had
changes
a
were
lot
made
more
to it,
pages.
And but I'm still using the one that I read and
Yeah,
made
me
my
too.
notes in. The one that we were handed today doesn't have my notes from my review. So I was,
They're in the back. She put the emails in the back. They're not included in the document yet.
exactly. But I mean my own personal notes, like, but at the last meeting, we were like, this is the thing to review, and
Yeah.
they said if you want to submit comments before May 15th, you could, but I mean, I have my own notes
Oh,
in
yeah.
here that I'm looking at as we're going through these changes. So, and the page numbers, like 14 refers to like the original document.
Yeah,
I don't
different.
think we were talking about the
Correct.
like, page 26 of 104 is going to be different from the page 27 of 32 or whatever, that changes, but the number 14 relates to like this manual document.
Yeah, I have a question on that, but because I thought about that. Would you rather not have a new the same document in the packet each time until we actually change it? And you're just using yours with notes and, it's because it's the same thing. There hasn't been any edits to it yet. And that way it's not confusing.
Because it's such a long document, my suggestion would be, and it really would help out staff from having to have a big task right at the end, is coming out of each meeting, there are edits and so forth that have been agreed to, and so as long as management agrees to it, those get made. And then there's a new version for the next meeting. And then first on the agenda is that the HR director will say, per our last meeting, let me share with you what I did. Here it is, here it is, here it is. Is that the read the way you want to? Okay, now let's pick up and move forward. And then so that you're making all of these changes section by section, so that at the end, you don't all have to get a document that staff has gone and made all the changes at once, and now you've got to review, the whole document again, wondering what was discussed 4 meetings ago and so forth. I mean, it's just a suggestion.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's
That would
just
be
that
wonderful.
that
That'd be
meeting
wonderful,
before,
yeah.
y'all were just asked to send your notes and your concerns and all of that right there. And I think that's why HR waited to make any edits. He was waiting on to see what you decide today.
Good. I agree, that'll be helpful. Thank you. Okay. Moving on to 407. I guess I've got 2 comments. I'm going to skip the page number. That's going to help me. But I say in the yellow section, it states that, quote, exempt employees shall receive 1 day off for each day worked. And then does this contradict page 32, 33 in the attorney's draft that says exempt employees shall not be compensated for any time off? They shall not receive their salaries for the week.
This is just in the event of an emergency. So, for example, you could have Frank in the field issuing permits, 20 hours in a day. So, he would get a day off as compensation for that. I don't think it's unfair.
Just emergencies, if
Yeah,
you have
this is just-
hurricanes or big storms and.
Right.
The prior manager's concern related to not employees who work, but employees who sit home during a declared emergency where the city had to shut down. And apparently, before we took over, there was some hurricane or whatever where the city had to spend a lot of money paying people to just sit home. And the commission became upset, and so the manager wanted that gone. And so that is what I put in my document. This language doesn't address people who sit home.
Yeah, they were getting time and a half for sitting at home.
Right, so where is that going to change now? Is the
Well,
next
it's
Not
been
included in the
removed.
document.
Yeah, I thought.
They're not getting time, a time and a half.
Happened when the storm hit, the former city manager
No, it was
did.
actually COVID.
This is COVID, this language is
COVID,
from
okay.
COVID.
Made it change.
I mean, I'm going to infer here during COVID, when the city closed and sent employees home, all employees were still paid, correct? The regular salary, hourly wage, hourly rate, every employee was still paid. Those employees that physically came into work, meaning whether to this building, whatever, a city facility, or out on the field, such as Public Works or sanitation, at some point it was approved that they would be compensated 1.5 times their normal hourly rate. I'm inferring that to be correct?
I think
That sounds
the
right.
ones at home.
I came in on the tail end of it,
My
so.
understanding was the ones at home were also making time and a half.
Okay, the purpose of this one is, upon a declaration of an emergency, if employees are sent home, employees will still be paid, and without the language, but the language that is added here is at such time that they do report physically to come into work, upon a declaration of an emergency, a state of emergency, excuse me, declared by the Board of Commission, then those employees will be paid those employees will not be paid. Those employees will receive 1 day off or a day of vacation, whatever we're going to call it, for each day that they work. So it's not directly compensation. It is now what is commonly called compensatory time off, for example.
Right.
Excuse me.
That makes sense now. That makes sense. Thank you.
So then, where is it that says if we have to shut down and you are not needed to come in, you won't be paid?
That would likely be under the emergency declaration that the Board of Commission approves. That would have to be in that language.
So that would be on a case-by-case, emergency-by-emergency basis?
You shouldn't do
Should be.
personnel benefits in an emergency declaration. I mean, my recommendation to the city is that you address the issue in this section and just specify if you are, and it's, here it's even going to be different between whether you are FLSA exempt or not, because if you are FLSA exempt, let's say you're a department head, we all know how that works. If you work any time during the pay period, you're paid your full salary. And people a lot of times feel it's unfair because those tend to be higher compensated people, whereas, here I am, a lower compensated person, and I get paid by the hour, and so if I'm not here, I get 0, or if I'm only here 3 hours, I only get 3 hours, but that's the way the FLSA works. But I think unless the city wants to encounter this drama again, you really just need to put it in the policy, make sure everybody understands. If we have to shut down for some emergency and you are not an essential person who's asked to or told to come into work, you have to sit home. And if you sit home and you are hourly, you get paid only what you work for hourly. And if you aren't working, you don't get paid. If you're salary, you don't get your salary if you do not perform any service within the pay period. And, usually how it's written is that you have the option, if you have leave on the books, vacation leave on the books, that you're allowed to take your vacation leave if you want to keep getting a paycheck.
I would have to, I'm not sure what the city has done before, that's why I'm asking, but this appears to be as a result of COVID, but however direction, once the city declares an emergency, I think that's up to the board to decide whether they want to pay employees or not, but.
Well, before you got here, there was a big drama with the commission, and the commission got super really mad that a lot of money was spent by just giving it to employees to sit home. And then the people who actually came in got time and a half, and so, the mayor looked at the bill and said, what the heck's going on? And so your predecessor had worked with me on language that's in my drafts, you might want to take a look at that, but it just clarified it, and it's clearly some employees.
So that was during COVID though, correct?
I think that's the issue that.
Which was a very different, and that's why the federal government provided funding that was supposed to be used for that, but different cities utilize that funding in different ways. The previous city that I worked in, that's exactly what paid for anything related to COVID, particularly whether there were additional personnel costs. Where I was, we did not have additional personnel costs. We accounted for every single hour that was not worked. So we did not dock or deny or not pay employees because they were home during COVID. I know there were some cities that did do that, and it didn't end very well for them from the employees, but that's where I'm taking this language, that's where that's coming from, but I'm fine with however you want to proceed.
But it doesn't say COVID It just says emergency.
I understand, right.
So could we,
But we can add the language however,
can we say
yes.
exempt, FLA, you know, you get your salary. If you're non-exempt, if you don't work, you don't get paid.
Mm-hmm.
But that said, the Board of Commissioners can also always write an exception if, God forbid, COVID comes back again,
whatever
we
it might
get
be.
funds. But I would be in favor of having our standard language in the manual.
Yes, that's
And
it.
then an exception is voted on, as opposed to an exception for every emergency.
Add the little exception in there.
Okay. Anybody else want to add anything on that? So under 407, I suggest that we add the language about failure to report, similar to what the attorney included in his draft document on page 33, and that
I'm not sure how you can do that. I mean, if we have a hurricane, an employee's house could be destroyed. I mean, they can't come and work. They have their own problems.
Well, when you say you aren't sure how to do it, so legally speaking, you can. If the administration doesn't want to, then that's fine, but you can. I mean, it's done, employers do it all the time. And the flip side, there was a big issue in Largo.
Yeah, that did
about-
not end well for the city of Largo.
I understand.
That was
but-
ugly.
But, you know,
That was
legally you
very
can do
ugly.
it. I guess my thing, you know, both for the administration and for you guys and for the commission, is we just need to go into these things being as clear with our employees as we can of what is our rule, and not leave it silent so that arguments happen and litigation happens. So if we're not going to compel people to come in, then we won't compel people to come in. But the administration just needs to understand, you may get a lot of people saying, ooh, you know, I can't, because I've got an inch of water in my rose garden, you know, and there's nothing we could do about it. So, but it needs to be addressed one way or the other in the policy.
And I think the attorney gives leeway to your managers, to the city, that says the only exception to this policy will be for employees physically or medically unable to report. So in your example that the employee's house has blown down, certainly I would trust that the appropriate exception would take place. But if the employee doesn't show up because there's an inch of water in their rose garden, they need to know that's not acceptable. But I would trust your managers to make those kinds of decisions.
Like that example.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I stole shamelessly, so not mine. So where do we go from here?
We'll just add the failure to report language.
Okay,
That's fine.
all righty. And then if you're looking at the attorney's draft document, page 29, this addresses how employees may be required to utilize comp time. Employees may be required to utilize comp time in lieu of leave. I don't know that we address that anywhere. Where I'm coming from is I think employees get paid out for comp time, right?
Unused at the end of the year.
Okay. And so I would want to hold on to all my comp time so I can receive a big fat check.
Sure.
And that,
That's why some cities don't
and
allow
yeah,
that.
that's why and if this is the way you want to do it, but if you're paying out comp time, why would you not require them to take that first ahead of any vacation time to spare the budgets?
I agree.
Well,
Although you do get paid out for your
You can get paid.
vacation time when you do separate from the city.
When you
anyway.
separate, but
Correct. Yeah, not every year.
exactly, we don't pay out,
Well, I mean, I think.
trying to remember. Thoughts on that?
what we do in the city clerk's office for my administrative assistant, when she gets comp time for working meetings, she just either takes off early that Friday but she does put that first. That time off comes first on
So commonly
time
called
sheet.
flex time, you're flexing your
Flex.
schedule. If you work 12 hours one day, then the next 2 days later, you may only work
Or,
four to equal 16 8-hour days,
I
two
think
8-hour days.
we're all on the same page, but my least favorite word, may. I think it puts us in a position where one manager could, Clara might say, yeah, you got to take your comp time first,
it to-
but by having may, another department manager might not require comp time first. I'm seeking consistency.
If it's getting close to the end of the year and you have to have your personal days, because they don't roll over, my understanding, so they'll take that. It's all according to when you have to take what.
Can we change employees may be required to?
Will.
Employees will be required.
Yes.
Then I'm comfortable that all department heads are enforcing it
And
consistently.
the other thing that I mean, I haven't emphasized, but will, is one, is strongly encouraging employees to use the leave that does expire first.
Yeah.
Why employees don't do that is because it's partially a game, whether you get them paid out or you can roll them over to the next year. For 19 years, I worked full-time in Clearwater. My first 2 days were my floating holidays. And I would tell every employee the same thing. Oh, but then I will lose them. I'm a little confused.
Yeah.
That's why cities mandate vacation. Why do you mandate vacation? Because every employee needs to get away from work. Even I do, to a certain extent.
Right.
Also, it alleviates payouts, huge payouts. The city that I was
Exactly.
previously at, my predecessor received $135,000 in paid vacation and paid sick.
That's the horror story I'm trying to avoid.
That person worked there for 7 years.
And that's what my assistant does. She just uses good judgment of when everything has to be taken, because she don't want to lose anything either.
Yeah, and just to be clear, we don't want to remove any benefits from any employees. It's really best managing the benefits that we do have, and that's the role in my role, to ensure we're as efficient and effective as possible.
Good. Okay. I think we're on the same page. Employees will be required to take comp time first. Then if I can direct you to page 26 of the attorney's draft document.
I'm sorry, can we go back? I can't find that may that you're speaking of.
I'm sorry.
We can't find what you're speaking of.
It's not addressed in our document. So
No, you said may, we need to change may.
I think that entire section is not in this document.
correct.
It would, so,
And maybe, Sean, maybe it's someplace else and I just didn't see it. But when I didn't see any language, and maybe I just didn't see it. Or again, it should be a policy. You have to take this time first, this time next, this time next. And it could be my ignorance that I just didn't see it, or maybe it's in a separate policy.
and we can, just where it is addressed in the document, we will add or modify at that location in the document.
Right.
I mean, there is a reference to compensatory time here.
All right. On page 26 in the attorney draft document, there's specific information about how lunches, breaks, flex time, and work at home will be handled. I don't recall seeing any of this in the city's document. So my question is, should it be?
That's generally done on a case-by-case basis. We're not that large.
So what,
Size doesn't matter.
so I guess what is the language? I'm sorry I don't have that in front of me, but what's the recommendation regarding lunch periods, breaks, flex
It's-
time working at home?
So the attorney's draft document just includes specification that the employee has to be completely removed from detail, they're not required to work, how the times are coordinated. There's just, again, I want to
Gotcha.
protect us because I've seen organizations where people sit at their desk and eat lunch,
And they claim
clock
they're-
out, no lunch, getting extra hours, blowing the budget, and that's not good for the employee's mental health. The employee, unless it's an emergency, is entitled and should take a lunch
30-minute
period and a
lunch
break.
break.
And
I
I think
agree.
it's good that
I
we
agree.
specify that.
That's just the sections to add.
That language that you see is directly from my experience with case law and the regs, which say that to avoid the lawsuit, you have to do two things. You have to have the explicit, specific written policy, and you have to consistently enforce that policy. So that's why I'd recommended that.
Yeah, particularly for unpaid, well, but actually, we do, so, we do pay for lunch, correct?
None of it's duty-free.
No, in upstairs, like my assistant, of course, I'm salary, so, my assistant, she takes her lunch at her desk. We have no break room, so, but she's clocked out while she's eating at her desk.
We have conference rooms that can be used.
I have a concern if she's eating at her desk.
Right, so
Is she
that's-
answering her phone?
No.
Is she, okay.
No, she just takes her lunch.
That leaves us open
Sure does.
to possible litigation. Well, I was forced to sit at my desk and nobody was answering the
She
phone.
chooses to
and-
sit there. Sometimes she may go outside,
Yeah,
or,
the-
but
the
if
big-
she's at her
The biggest
desk.
thing is that, that management has to be on top of enforcing the policy, because what happens is, the lawsuit comes, and I've had several of these, and so the employer says, oh, no, they're supposed to take off during their lunch and not do any work, but then the plaintiff attorney, who has done lovely record requests, say, okay, manager, here's a list of 4 months' worth of messages that we can see that your assistant, during her, quote, lunch period, answered, responded to, including sending you, manager, during the lunch period, several notes of calls that came in or whatever. So how can you be seeing this happening during her lunch and not understand she's working during lunch? That's really the issue. And so we can write the policy, and that's what's happening today. And of course, it's up for the management team to make sure if they have a hourly, non-exempt person, and it is their lunchtime, they need to step away from their duties. And and this is the key thing that's always the most difficult, because we all want to be nice, but if we catch them performing work during a non-work hour, they need to be first gently counseled, and then if they don't stop, they need to be disciplined. Because we need to be able to show that we're enforcing that policy to avoid that FLSA lawsuit if we get it.
Yeah, and I've had several over my career where employees did come back later and said, hey, I worked through. And in one city, it cost us about $12,000, another city. So I agree with, and we will, this is something that I've noticed as well, and I think it's a good idea to include it in here as well. So if it isn't already in the section, we will include.
Yeah, and, I trust your judgment. Just consider taking a look at page 26 of the attorneys and come up with your best language, but I think we should include lunch periods, something about break. Now, I'm not sure what the city's position is on flex time and work at home. Should those two sections be included or not?
Well, I mentioned flex time, the example I gave a few minutes ago, and it should be included. There should be language for all of these now, and including the work at home, which is quite possibly the biggest issue, more than the lunch periods, because you're subject to the same issue as working through lunch. Well, I worked for 12 hours instead of 8 hours, but it may not have, whether it was approved or not is too late after Fair Labor Standards is calling you.
And the attorney's language says the Madeira Beach Board of Commissioners does not recognize a work-at-home program. Is that the case, that nobody can ever work at home?
I don't think that's the case, but I've only been here for 5 months. I don't know what the commissions or prior commissions thought of that before, but clearly COVID changed all of that. And now going forward, my recommendation to the commission, I've made comments to them that may be part of our flex of what we offer going forward. We're struggling to find employees like everyone else. We can't hire a planner. We can't hire a deputy building official. We struggle to hire recreation employees, et cetera, sanitation, public works. Perhaps offering varying work schedules, flexibility is something that we need to do.
Okay. I'm glad to hear you say that. I'm a huge proponent of working at home under the right circumstances, but you don't just open the floodgates. So I'm encouraged
Correct. No,
that
not
you're
for-
going to listen and come up with something, and I look forward to seeing what that is. Okay. That was the last of my comments in section 4. Do my colleagues have anything that they would like to bring up? No? Okay. All right, I'd like to do a quick check here. It's 4:07. At our last meeting, we had a stated goal of finishing up all of this by the end of September, which means we hope to get through sections 4, 5, and 6 today. I think we've had some great discussion. So my question to the group here, do we want to stick to that goal of getting through sections 5 and 6 and just go on until the end? Or do we set a hard stop maybe at 12:30 and figure out where we go? I'm open to either. I don't know. I just want to be respectful of everyone's time.
It's up to you how you want to work it.
And that is another option. You know, we're not meeting for another couple of months. If we want to stop earlier rather than later, but then add another work session just so we still meet our September goal.
Our next meeting is August 16th.
Yeah. And I don't see how we can possibly stay on track if we hold off the discussion until then. So I think my recommendation would be, we stop it whenever's convenient for you, either now or at 12:30, and then schedule another meeting to get through Articles 6, and then continue. But again, that's just my preference. What do you folks, how would you like to
Well, if we're
proceed?
just going to do Article 6, maybe we should
Well, we still have
read
5.
through. Oh,
We
5,
still have
that's right.
Article 5
Okay.
and 6. We've only done one article of our assignment. Judith Ann, you said you have another commitment. What would be your preference for today?
So how close are we to finishing? We finished 4, is that right?
Correct. Article 5 is pretty short. As it is written, my thought on page 16 is this is very, very short, and I'm suggesting that we consider the attorney draft language on page 105, which I think is more robust. But again, this could be a big discussion. And also consider, if you don't want to go with the attorney's basis, at least consider, I don't like the idea that a performance plan may, my least favorite word, may be used as a factor in granting merit increase. At the very least, it will be, right? You know, how else do you do merits?
And which page are you on right now?
Page 501, which is on page 16 of our original one, not the attorney draft. but on the original one, Judith Ann, that we talked about, it's in.
Oh, maybe.
Yeah,
But we already talked about the merit increases in a different place. Section 403 is merit increase, so why do we have merit increase in 501 also? I feel
Article
like
5 talks about employee performance evaluations.
One talks about pay, the other talks about performance evaluations.
I don't see that may either.
I think it's 4 lines down, second paragraph.
Evaluation reminders shall be given.
paragraph starts with, "The evaluation is used," next sentence, "of assigned duties," next sentence, "also be used," next,
Yeah, they're
"or in
in there.
support, it may also be used as a factor in granting merit pay increases." Why wouldn't we say it will?
I think we
I mean,
can,
how else do you grant merit increases other than
that's fine.
the evaluation?
That makes
I'm
sense.
fine with that.
I just get confused of why we have to have multiple sections dealing with merit increases. So we had 403, merit increases based on performance, I don't know.
I think it's just in relation to the articles, like specific article.
Yeah, Article 4 is the pay and classification plan. Article 5 clarify, or, again, employee performance evaluations. I mean, there's some overlap. I think that's,
Okay.
If you're, I don't know if any of you caught up, but if you're keeping the language in 501 in the city draft, you should probably get rid of the reference to the city manager only being a male. Very first sentence.
I think the whole document.
Yeah,
will
we're going to go through
remove
the whole document.
Reference, gender references.
I suggested that the attorney's draft on page 105 gives kind of a more 7-bullet approach to it. I don't feel strongly about it, but, you know, and I guess I asked the attorney, are we at risk with the way Section 501 is currently written if we get rid of the may to become will, and then the he, or the he? Are you comfortable with that?
You're always at risk, but, you know, I mean, if you make those adjustments, I mean, I'm not gonna
There's no,
fuss
you.
over it.
And so now, other thoughts on that? So here we are at 1214, I guess, same question. We've got Article 6, which is benefits, and I've got a whole slew of thoughts. I've got about 25 thoughts as they relate to benefits. So those of you who, and I'm, you know, I have no obligations this afternoon, but I respect that some of you do. How would you like to proceed? I anticipate that this could be maybe a good 20 minutes, half-hour discussion.
I guess when we were doing our scheduling, I was assuming that our meetings would be about 2 hours. So I do have other work obligations. I guess I would move to adjourn, I guess in response to, can we still stay on our schedule? The other sections are not as long, like 6, I think, because it's an important section on benefits and you have a lot of feedback. I would say we do that in the next session, but like Article 7 is quite short and 8, so I don't know that we'll be necessarily off schedule if we have our next meeting as planned in August. Is that right, August? Yeah.
If we can't, well,
Maybe, we try, and that we don't schedule an extra meeting, but if we get off track at our next meeting and we still aren't caught up, we'll consider adding a session. Is that
okay.
fair?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Okay.
That would be good.
So, great. Before we adjourn, I would like to revisit what we talked about at the beginning of the meeting. If some people prefer to just chat when we get here, other people would prefer to have the comments submitted ahead of time. What is the city's preference so that you can best prepare? Do you want our feedback ahead of time, or would you prefer to just wait until we get here?
I would prefer you email it and we can just compile it. I think as you're aware, you're just prohibited from
Yeah, right.
discussing among yourselves, but I'm perfectly fine if you just want to send that to us. We will compile it and put it in the next meeting agenda.
Okay. Any objections? Obviously, nobody is required to do that, but I also find it helpful.
Sure.
I would also like to figure out, what do we do if somebody can't attend a meeting? You brought up so many good comments, and we had good discussions. On the flip side of that coin, we can't just keep going back. I'm thinking about if Christine comes in and has additional things about this, would the commission like to allow time to let her speak to those points? Do we hold ourselves accountable that if we can't take the meeting, we put our suggestions in writing?
My recommendation would be to, if someone missed and they have something they want to go back in time, is that we keep forging ahead so that staff can have the modifications going and get closer and closer to a final document. And then you as chair at the end of the process, then you can allow folks that want to come back and revisit things that, they want to take another shot at, or they didn't get to address before because they were absent. And that would be sort of a wrap-up thing to address at that time. That would be my recommendation.
Yeah, who knows, maybe somebody already addressed it and
Yeah,
came circled back on it.
I'm good with that. Everybody else? Okay?
So I just have a quick question.
Yeah.
I'll go back and make the changes, but am I to assume that everything that is in blue now up through Article,
5.
is good to put into black pending a final?
Well, so for there, the only thing I would think of is, might you want to leave it all?
Would leave it.
Because the commission is going to want to see what was happening.
Oh,
So leave it
Yeah, we
all
would
in track
move it.
change, even through to the commission.
gotcha.
Yeah, you haven't approved anything yet.
Right. And so you'll label this, let's say, version 2 in today's date, June 2nd?
Whatever version you
The
like.
Yeah.
June 2nd, 2022 version.
Thank you. All right,
Faithfully submitted. HR extraordinary.
all right. Would anybody else like to add anything, questions?
I just want to thank all of you for your time. Thank you very much. It's a lot to do and to come in here, so very much appreciate your comments, your time, and your passion for it, so thank you.
Great. Do we have a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned at 12:20.